Hey, what's going on, U.S. History people? We have video 35, continuing with World War I. This one will be on the home front and what life was like domestically within the United States.
All right, so let's talk about the United States mobilizing from a nation at peace to a nation at war. So one term from this time period that comes up is something referred to as total war, where society in general is really taken and completely focused on a victory in a war effort. This will be something the United States will be totally focused on, is winning a war against the Central Powers. So things like the draft, rationing, the sale of war bonds, all examples of total war. Men being required to join the military, rationing, limiting how much of a product or food someone can buy or consume, and also the sale of war bonds, the attempt to try and raise money to support the war effort. So during this time period, there was the development of something known as the Council of National Defense, and it was used by President Wilson to control aspects of the American economy. So we're seeing a strong influence of government control of the economy, moving away from those laissez-faire traditions of the United States in order to, again, try and win the war. So the government will set price and regulate the sale of things like food and fuel, ultimately to support the war effort. So food was needed overseas to support the troops, so it gave limited options to people at home. The government did really tried to use forms of propaganda to get American people to support this movement. Things like victory gardens, which really helped people to grow their own food, also attempting to do things like a meatless Monday, where people would choose not to eat meat in order to ration or save food. So we also saw shifts in the workforce at this time. So as the economy was mobilizing to support the war effort, over 16% of the male workforce in the United States at the time, in 1917, would eventually leave their jobs and join the military. So we see close to 1 million women entering the workforce to fill those jobs. Also, African Americans were given more opportunity in this economic shift to work in industrial jobs. This will help lead to something known as the Great Migration from 1910 to 1920, where African Americans in large numbers will leave the South for the North, ultimately looking for better working conditions and pay, but also in an attempt to try and escape Jim Crow segregation. Many of these people migrating north will settle in places like Chicago and Detroit.
Jumping over to freedom and civil liberties during the war, we have one of the best mustaches in U.S. history. This is Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes. Look at the length of that mustache. So he is going to play an important role in the court case Schenck versus the United States. This is a 1919 Supreme Court ruling that restricted freedom of speech. And what we see is that restriction of civil liberties are often going to increase in times of war. This is nothing new. We've seen it in the Civil War, see it in World War I, we'll see it in World War II. And what Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes argued is that free speech does not give you the right to shout fire in a crowded theater. So there are limits to freedom of speech. Congress can prevent the use of words that present a clear and present danger. Everybody circle or highlight for us clear and present danger. If your speech is posing a threat, it can be limited. The Espionage Act of 1917 and Sedition Act of 1918 plays a role in this. This makes it a crime to interfere with the draft and allowed the government to stop treasonous mail. And this made it a crime to speak or publish disloyal speech and material, especially as it relates to the war effort. 1,500 Americans were sent to jail, and the IWW, the International Workers of the World, this union was targeted. This was upheld by the Supreme Court, but a minority of the Supreme Court was concerned about the loss of civil liberties during this time.
All right, so some other areas the war will impact American society. Again, going back to economic, after the war is over, we'll see the demand for consumer goods will increase as soldiers start to return home and people have extra money in their pocket, but this will cause inflation. So we'll see the price of many consumer products will greatly increase and make it difficult for some to buy. Also, we'll see farmers will be hurt by the drop in demand for food. During the war, there was a high demand. There was food being sent overseas to Europe to support those populations as well as soldiers. When the war comes to an end, that demand also comes to an end, hurting farmers. So at the end of World War I, something known as the First Red Scare will develop in the United States. Following the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, Americans feared the spread of communism coming to the United States. As a result of this, there's something known as the Palmer Raids, named after the Attorney General Palmer at the time, and they pursued controversial arrests and deportation of suspected radicals and anarchists, also communists. You actually can see a picture up here in the top right. This is a picture of Attorney General Palmer's home was bombed, and this helps to perpetuate those deportations and arrests. And finally, we see the rise of something known as xenophobia, a fear of foreigners. So we also see an increase in nativism during World War I and towards the end of the war.
All right, we'll finish with a quick recap. We have Total War, know what it is and how basically all aspects of society are geared towards winning the war. Government intervention in the economy happened during World War I. Changes in the workforce. You see lots of men joining the military and women and minorities replacing them in factories. Schenck versus the United States stated that free speech could be limited if it poses a threat. The Espionage and Sedition Acts of 1917 and 1918 restricted civil liberties. The economic impact of World War I, and finally the Red Scare or fear of communism. Thank you very much for watching. Look forward to seeing you back here for video number 36. Best of luck on all your exams this year, especially the one in June, and have a good day.